Hey everybody, this is Gregory from Dapp University, and today I have another guest on the channel. I have Luke Autry here to talk about his project ERC dEX, which is a decentralized exchange. And if you'd like to see more videos about me talking with people like Luke who are building on top of Ethereum, be sure to subscribe to the channel. So welcome, Luke. You want to say hey to everybody? Hey.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on here. You got some great videos, and you've had some great, interesting guests that I've liked taking a look at your conversation. So it's good to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we're glad to have you on. So before we jump into like all these, kind of focused questions, do you want to give us an elevator pitch for what you're working on at ERC dEX?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so ERC dEX is a peer-to-peer decentralized trading platform for Ethereum tokens. So if I'm sure your viewers are pretty familiar with Ethereum and the various tokens, there's at this point thousands of tokens. We allow you to trade tokens on our site, so it's not too unlike some of the previous applications out there like Ether Delta. What we've done is we've kind of built a really polished UI, and we've built a bunch of developer tools so that it makes it really easy to integrate with the platform. And so we're letting people trade tokens without the risk of having it on a centralized exchange.
Very cool. So can you give me kind of an overview of how a decentralized exchange would fundamentally work differently from a centralized exchange that you can purchase cryptocurrency on?
Yeah, I think so. And this is how I usually put it is centralized exchanges are what most people have used, right? So
right.
You've used Coinbase, you use Gemini, and really what you do is you take your money, you got a paycheck, you give them $1,000 or whatever, and you get a certain number of tokens, and then you're allowed to trade that on their exchange. And so you're depositing money and then trading on their platform. And so they're responsible for keeping an accurate kind of ledger of the buys and the sells and making sure that everyone's balances stay correct. So they build a centralized system, a traditional software system to do that. And there's just kind of some problems with that. I mean, one, it actually turns out to be pretty hard to keep a ledger of all that stuff. It's not transparent what's going on behind the scenes. So you're giving a lot of trust to the centralized exchange. And not just trust, but risk, right? So
right.
They may not be evil, and most of them are not. They're trying to run a business. But the problem is any mistake that compromises your system, people could then take money out and then it's gone. And whether it was their fault or not, or the great degradations of that, your money was still stolen. So this is kind of a personal thing to me. I mean, I've been involved in crypto for a long time, and I was trading and writing bots on Mt. Gox back in 2012 and 2013, and I lost, a significant amount of money. So,
yeah,
from that point forward, it was like, never again will I have any, significant amount of money on a centralized exchange. And to the extent that I have to, it'll be for the minimum time possible, right? I'd want to get in there and get out. So, to me, it's kind of a personal story. And so that's sort of an explanation of a centralized exchange, right? So then we've gotten into decentralized exchanges, and I think it's kind of important to break down what that means, because decentralized means something different to everyone, even though it has a very particular technical meaning. The actual implementations are quite different. So at the bare minimum, I think it means, to a lot of people, it means peer-to-peer. So it means that you have traders coming in from the system from various sources, and they're trading with each other. So that would be something like Shapeshift, right?
Sure.
Shapeshift is, I don't usually call it decentralized, but it is certainly peer-to-peer because it's actually linking you up to a buyer or a seller. But they ultimately kind of have to have those funds on their platform. And then you have things like us, 0x relayers, which we'll get into later, but other services like Ether Delta and iDEX, these sorts of platforms where they're actually locking up funds. In some cases, they're locking up funds in a smart contract, or you're simply signing messages that indicate a desire to trade. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it makes sure that the money isn't going into some third party's wallet. It's either going into a contract that has hopefully been security audited, or you're signing a cryptographically secure message that says you're willing to trade this amount.
Right.
And so they all have their own different flavor of decentralization, but the gist of it is that they're non-custodial. You're not trusting someone with your cash.
Right. That's a great explanation. So, yeah, there's a lot in that I kind of want to get into. You mentioned the 0x protocol briefly. You maybe want to explain what that is to people?
Yeah, definitely. So 0x Project, if you're not familiar with it, 0xproject.com. They've created an open protocol. They did, token sale maybe last August, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I think they have one of the few teams that actually had a working live production system ready when they launched their token.
Right.
So to me, that puts them, way ahead of the pack in a lot of cases. But what it is it is a open protocol, and it's a set of tools and some smart contracts that create a system for exchanging ERC20 tokens. And that's also expanding beyond ERC20 tokens in the future. Their V2 is due to come out the next month or two, I believe. So you'll be able to do ERC 721 and then eventually any other kind of Ethereum token, potentially cross-chain trading in the future once we figure out a cheap and secure way to do that, assuming it's possible. So it is. It really defines a message format to express the type of trade that you want to do. So the technicals are, you can go read the white paper, but essentially you create an order object and sign it with your wallet. So you'd use something like MetaMask or any Web3 client. There's some mobile ones. Toshi is one, Cipher browser, Status. And so you kind of create this message, and it says what token you want to trade, what you want to exchange for it. So, token A, token B, and what it boils down to is what price do you want to trade it at, and how much do you want to trade.
Right.
And you sign that order, and it goes onto an off-chain database. So in the case of ERC dEX, we build on 0x, and we host our own database and servers where we actually store those orders that could technically be filled anywhere. That you don't have to use our exchange to fill it, but we're just the ones that keep track of it. Right. And broadcast them so other people can find them. And if someone finds the order and they want to fill it, then they can. And it's completely open in that way. And once that happens, the tokens stay in your wallet until the order is actually filled. And then there's an atomic swap in the smart contract, or enabled by the smart contract. And so until it gets filled, you still have your token. So at no point do the tokens go into any other account. And of course, the way that we have a business is that we take a fee from that. So in the smart contract, it defines a way to specify a fee. And so we take out a tiny little sliver when the order fills, and that money goes to us, and then the token swap with the buyer and the seller. So that's the gist of it. And that's, if your viewers are familiar with, there's some other solutions out there. Kyber is a big one, AirSwap, Bancor. They all kind of have their own protocols. And I would say most of those are really built around optimizing the shapeshift kind of experience. So just saying, I want to buy this token, and just tell me how to buy it, right? Whereas 0x actually enables a full kind of trading experience where you have an order book where you're dealing with prices, where you're seeing the various price levels, where you're setting limit orders saying that I want to buy at this price.
Right.
So it kind of enables a lot more, technical traders to get involved, because
Right.
it's not simply clicking one button. It's the ability to apply an advanced strategy. And that's kind of what we're building around, is allowing that type of user to get involved.
Right. Yeah. So like maybe this is like on other exchanges, perhaps centralized ones, where you can do limit orders or just like a market order. Like that's kind of what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Where some of these protocols just have we make the decision for you, and we do some of those things behind the scenes. And you're talking about more of an advanced strategy where we get people who might have other backgrounds who want to implement something like that into their cryptocurrency trading. That's awesome. So can you tell me about, when you all started working on this project and what the development life cycle that looked like to kind of your first launch?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I would say we really got started on this in maybe September or October of last year. So it was right around when 0x, their token sale and product went live. I had already kind of been paying attention to that and getting involved tentatively. And I linked up, through various Slack communities with the team that we have together. Dave, who is our CEO, he was very interested in this and had a kind of a business and a software background. So we just started pursuing the idea of building a relayer. I was pretty impressed with what the 0x team had put out there. They put out some really good developer tools. They seemed to really prioritize developers getting involved with the project, and they built 0x.js, which is kind of a JavaScript TypeScript library that allows you to build on these contracts without necessarily needing to know all of the internals of the contract.
Cool.
So it's a great developer ecosystem. It's very inviting. And we thought we could build a good business out of it and build a great product. So that's what we've done.
Awesome. Well, I think you've accomplished that goal. So can you tell me about your particular involvement on the project?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I was already kind of following this project before, and it kind of built a proof of concept relayer early on, just sort of to learn the protocol, learn what it was capable of. Of course, as with all things software, I think we tend to underestimate the complexity of a project.
That's right.
Which is a good and a bad attribute. The sort of like fearless optimism, I think, is a productive characteristic, because you kind of say to yourself, well, how hard could it be, right? What's the big deal? You slap some orders on a screen, buy, sell. It's easy.
That's right. Famous last words.
Yeah, exactly. It turns out to be a really complex problem space, and it's great to work with. I've been a software engineer for many years. Worked on enterprise software and diet and fitness software and all sorts of things. And of course, been involved in crypto, like written smart contracts and things like this. So this seemed to be a great intersection of through crypto and being able to get into smart contracts, being able to do a traditional web application with a really beefy front end and back end database, everything. So it really kind of checks all the boxes in terms of what's interesting to work on from a developer's perspective. I'm CEO, which at the size of the company we are is really kind of, I'm like the main programmer, right? So it's a great fun thing to work on, and it's there's a huge market need for it. So
yeah, very cool. I imagine you're wearing a lot of hats over there.
Yeah, for sure. On a lot more meetings than you typically would be if you were just sort of like a lone programmer out in the wild. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of partnerships. One of the big challenges of a decentralized exchange, or any exchange really, is the issue of liquidity. And we might get into this, but it's just you have to have enough volume on there to make it worth people's while to be able to get a good price and to come to use your platform. So we, are doing everything we can to get those big partners onboarded, which means, I'm on the meetings, I'm talking to customers, trying to figure out what are their problems, what do they like, what don't they like. So it's very much a kind of an agile process of just not building too much, just building just enough, and then trying to figure out if what you've built is effective.
Very cool. So yeah, let's talk about that for a second. Talk about, liquidity and volume, and what are the challenges of getting people to use a DEX, and what's like, have you found like a threshold that you need in order to make a product active and viable?
Yeah, there are a lot of challenges there. So one is, I think this is not a challenge specifically to exchanges. It's really for all dApps, but just the fact that you have to have a bunch of tools just to get started, right?
Right.
So if you want to be able to sign messages, if you want to be able to send transactions to Ethereum, you've got to have MetaMask, or maybe you want to have like a local parity node running. You kind of have to understand like what it is that you're doing. With exchanges, you have concepts like you have to set token allowances, like ERC 20 tokens. The smart contract can't move that token on your behalf unless you tell it you're allowed to. So that's another transaction you have to sign. You have to, for instance, Ether itself is not a ERC 20 token. It's the primary unit of Ethereum.
Right.
So in order to trade that with other tokens, you have to do something called wrapping, which is basically where you lock up the ETH in a smart contract. So there's a lot of these sort of technical UX challenges that I think are a barrier to entry, that are not ideal when you compare it to a centralized exchange where you just put in your information. And I mean, there's some pretty onerous things to get set up on a centralized exchange too, but at least people are familiar with it, right? They understand like, oh, I have to show my driver's license and all that.
Right.
So that's one challenge. But getting back to the volume problem is really you have to make it worthwhile for liquidity partners or market makers to get involved on your platform, because by default they're not convinced that they can make any money that way, right? Maybe they're already making money on centralized exchanges and they have a good business there, and they would say, why bother with a decentralized exchange, right? They may not even be in the crypto space. They may be in the traditional financial markets space. So it's a question of can we build a bridge to get people over from the traditional markets into the decentralized space? But I think it really comes down to being an economic question. So it's really just a matter of, on a trade, how much can a big liquidity partner make? What is their spread? Can they make 0.1% per trade? Can they make 0.5% per trade? Are they losing money on trades, right? So you have to be able to answer that question. It's not simply, we don't think it's possible to completely build this business from the retail side. In other words, end users. So, your average viewer, folks on Reddit, things like that, which I very much sympathize with, that you don't build enough liquidity organically with that side. You really have to go to big players that have a lot of reserves of tokens, and you have to make it viable for them as a business. So that's very much what we're doing. That's our strategy. And I can go into that side of it a little more if you're interested in what specifically we're doing that no one else is doing.
Sure, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so one project that we've got right now, and this is really kind of a sneak peek because we haven't released anything publicly about this, is we are implementing two things. So one, we're implementing something we call market maker rebates. And so this is something that's been around in traditional markets. And essentially what it is that the market maker, so someone that's opening big trades on the buy and the sell side, they're getting a portion of the fees. And we've been able to do this by writing our own smart contract that actually can split the fees. So as I mentioned earlier in the call, I, you know, so the relayer actually takes a cut, right? So something like 0.2% for the taker. And so what we can do through this smart contract is make an agreement with a big market maker and say, hey, if you come onto our platform and use it, then we can give you 10% of those fees, 20%, whatever the deal is. And that means that when someone comes and fills the order, they just automatically get those fees, and it's all powered through smart contracts in the Ethereum blockchain. Wow. So it's still trustless, right? And it's using the technology for what it's meant to be used for, and it's also incentivizing those players with big token reserves to come on and take a risk and make money, because it's moving the needle towards profitability for them, right? It's making it easier for them to make money. And so to this point, no one else in the decentralized space has really been able to do this. So that's something we'll have coming very soon. And kind of a nice pairing with that is we're developing market making software. And market making is kind of a technical subject, but really all you have to know is that people have big token reserves, and they come and they make orders on the buy side and the sell side. And on either of those sides, they calculate the spread, right? They say, here's the midpoint price. Let's say the price is 100. Well, I'm going to list sell orders at 101 and buy orders at 99, right? And I'm going to make a 1% spread on that. And so whether the market goes up or down, they're making a little bit of a profit based on the current price on those trades. And so we are building software that essentially allows you to define your strategy and build a strategy and configuration around doing that, and then have it actually execute on our platform. So the nice thing about this is you don't necessarily need to understand everything about working with decentralized technology, because we've kind of packaged it into one thing, right? So we packaged the Ethereum node and the software necessary to run this stuff kind of in an easy turnkey experience. So you really just run a command and you can start designing a strategy. And that's really a novel thing in this space, because for the most part, people are just writing custom scripts. And if we can lower the barrier to entry for prop firms or trading firms to get involved, we think that's going to make a big difference, because there is some work from their perspective, some engineering effort to be able to create the software. So we're trying to make that as easy as possible for them, which in the end will benefit the end user, because they'll actually be able to buy and sell tokens at a decent price.
Awesome. That sounds like you guys have got, some really exciting stuff out there right now, and also some, pretty cool stuff coming down the pike in the pipeline.
Yep.
Yeah. So how did you, get into blockchain? You mentioned being into crypto before and, a long running software development career. How did you get into the actual, Ethereum development side of things?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, initially I was involved in like Bitcoin, and, I remember I went to some kind of like sort of libertarian leading political conference, back in 2010 or something. And like some guy was like, hey man, you want some Bitcoin? I was like, what is this? Is this for like buying drugs or something? And he was like, yeah, well, you could use it for that.
Yeah.
And so back then it was just mystical thing, but it's like magic internet money. And
yeah,
I was like, okay.
I had a friend, actually, sorry to interrupt. I had a friend, I've always wanted to just share this because it's always so funny. I have a friend who always talks about like, kicking himself because he didn't buy Bitcoin, at a certain time. And he said, yeah, but back then, like it would have been like if somebody walked up to you and said, hey, do you want to buy some magic beans?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Exactly. So sorry.
It was exactly that way, where it just, no one was saying like, what if this is worth $10,000 one day? That was not a thought in anyone's head. It was like, maybe you could use this to buy something one day. The talk then was not as a store of value. It was very much like, maybe this could be a different kind of currency. So, I continue to stay involved and did a fair amount of trading. I really didn't get into Ethereum development until, I guess, really early 2017. And it's sort of an intimidating thing, but the thing that I tell people is if you already know how to code, then it's really not going to be a super hard thing to learn because frankly, the EVM is just not capable of that much. So it ends
Right.
up being a very simple development experience. Now that doesn't mean that you can't write something really bad and destructive because you can. It's one of those things that's like we've heard the horror stories and seen them play out. So you do have to be very careful. But the actual process of understanding the code and writing the code, I think, should be accessible to most developers. I think the best way to get involved in a lot of things, I think this is true of traditional programming languages, but it's also true of Ethereum, is just think of a game that you think would be cool and start trying to make that game and kind of power it by a smart contract or something, right? So,
Right.
think about like a game like blackjack or something. Pretty simple game, right? Well, it's actually pretty tough to implement that. And you may never finish it, right? But you're going to learn a lot along the way. So,
Right.
um, I tell people just like think of something you want to see and then just take a stab at it and don't worry yourself too much over whether it will ultimately be successful because that really just doesn't matter. You just need to get involved. Once you understand what it's capable of, that's going to spawn other ideas, right? You're going to have, I have ideas all the time that I wouldn't have thought of a few months ago, but as I've learned more, it's like, oh, well, you could do it this way, and then that would power this. So I think that's the only way to do it, right? You just have to jump in somewhere and um, start writing code, really.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great suggestion. I always think that building things is the best way to learn. And yeah, it's great to kind of start with a use case that you're already familiar with and try to make it work.
Yep.
So, what do you think what do you think the future of this technology is? Ethereum and dApps, is this all going to be relegated to fintech? Do you see larger use cases outside of that? Do you have any kind of projected timelines?
Yeah, I actually was on a panel at South by Southwest, and I'll have to send it to you, and you can post it in
Sure.
the YouTube description. But it was the future of Ethereum app development, and we kind of that was the subject of it. We talked about where is this leading, what's a good candidate for decentralization, what isn't, and it's important to understand the difference, right? Because not everything belongs on a decentralized or a blockchain at all.
Right.
Anything that really does have a central authority that needs to make a decision, it's going to be much more efficient just to have that be on a centralized server. I mean, and we have really good technology and tools for that type of thing. The thing that is really a great use case are things that need to be transparent and things that need sort of consensus across some sort of global pool of actors. And that's where Ethereum comes in and is very powerful for being able to do that. I think at the most basic level, things like escrow are really a great use case, right? And I mean, unfortunately, it's mundane and uninteresting to most people, but it's a big deal. I mean,
Right.
it's a really big deal to be able to say like we don't need a third party to hold on to our funds until this deal is done, right?
Right.
That's something that it's a huge labor saving, kind of technology, really. So I think that's important. I think earlier this year, the first real estate deal on Ethereum was completed, or at least it was on a blockchain. I'm pretty sure it was Ethereum, and so that's awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
someone sold a house, using Ethereum. That's it. So I think things that do require, I think it will, for the most part, be things that are economic in nature. So things that involve transfers of value. to me, I have a hard time getting on board with like, we're going to be doing machine learning in the blockchain. Like that stuff is really computationally expensive and requires like a lot of threads on a single machine. So the idea of doing that in a consensus based way is like kind of crazy to me. But hey, if someone smarter than me says that they have a way to do it, then I'm all ears. So I think it'll start with sort of binding economic transfers, and who knows where it'll go from there. But I think that's a pretty good start, and it's not as if we've completely figured out the mundane use case. So yeah, but there's still plenty of work to do, and definitely plenty of opportunity for developers to get involved and make it a reality.
Right. So, it sounds like, 2017, we had a lot of big ICOs happen. In 2018, a lot of people have, started to see, projects pop up kind of all over the place. Seems like, the lights are really coming on the Christmas tree. Do you have any maybe vision for what the rest of this year could hold, or what we could expect to see maybe a year from now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a few things that I think will probably take off, or at least, start to realize their vision. I think one thing is gaming powered by tokens is going to be a thing. So that's something that I've wanted to see for a long time, which is, basically a game. You imagine like an RPG, like World of Warcraft or something like that. Right. Except the in-game currency is an actual token that can be traded using the technology that we're developing. So I think that's one of the most straightforward use cases beyond kind of the mundane ones that we've already talked about. Right. I think that's going to be really cool. As far as like it being the year of X, I think we still. I think there's still some reality that needs to set in that, a lot of these ICOs don't really have a working product. Right. I hate the guy to be like throw cold water on it, but it's like, there are really, really awesome projects out there. They're writing code, they're building stuff, and they have good businesses. And then there's some that are kind of just a marketing page. Right. And so, I think it's very, very important that the Ethereum and then the blockchain community in general police itself a little bit on this and kind of be a little more critical of what's coming out, right? Sure. I think another thing that we're going to see, and I don't want to say this is going to be the year of federal regulation, but I think you are going to see more government involvement in this technology. And traditionally, it takes a while for regulators to figure out what's going on. But we already know that the SEC has an opinion on cryptocurrencies in general. What they see is in some cases unregistered securities. Right. And so a big long-term vision of ours is to actually be able to allow trading of registered securities that are wrapped up in digital assets on our exchange. And that's a big project, and it's going to be a long-term project and an expensive one. But we see that as sort of democratizing the stock market, right? Right. Kind of taking some of the power away from entrenched interests and kind of getting that back to the end user and the individual. So I don't think that's going to be done this year, but I think a lot of the steps necessary to make that happen will be well on their way. So again, that's sort of like the mundane, right? Like it'd be more exciting if I was like, well, we're going to have super AI on the blockchain, but not there yet. We're still figuring out logistics, right? So I think that's what it looks like to me.
Right. Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll see you all kind of pushing the envelope on that one.
That's the goal.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, you mentioned, a couple of things that are on your, somewhat maybe next on your roadmap. Is there anything else that you'd like for the people watching to know that you guys might be coming out with, or any other exciting announcements?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a few things. So I mentioned the market maker program. We're going to be doing a big blog post and talking about the software and releasing documentation and allowing people to use it. So that's kind of a big focus now that you can expect, in the next couple of weeks. Down the road beyond that, we are designing basically a shape shift kind of experience, but using our platform.
Okay.
So for the folks that aren't interested in like looking at the order book and dealing with like the particular prices, it'll be more of a one-click experience. So we'll be able to just get to a page and say, hey, I want to buy ZRX or I want to sell ZRX. And you'll just be able to do it and sign a transaction, and it'll just kind of work in the background. So we're tying together a bunch of different things into one easy-to-use widget. So I think that's going to be really interesting to the average, sort of crypto head that just really likes to buy and sell tokens and have liquidity, but doesn't necessarily need to get into the technical nuance of, understanding the market.
Right.
So I think that's a pretty big one. And yeah, down the line, we're going to be, we're looking at various security token technologies. So things like Harbor and Polymath are defining a way to create tokens that are compliant registered securities. So we're looking at ways to integrate with those so that we can actually offer those on our platform to folks that are able to trade those. So I think that pretty well covers our roadmap for the next half a year or so.
Yeah, very cool. Like I said, it sounds like there's some really exciting things that we can expect to see from you all. We'll have to be sure to keep everyone updated. Just so for clarification, where can everyone find, your project online, social media, et cetera, et cetera?
Yep. So we're on all the usual suspects. So ERCDEX.com, that's our main site. From there, you can actually go into our app and look at that. And that's just app.ercdex.com. That's where you actually kind of see the product. If you just want to read about the product, the main ercdex.com one is fine. And then on there, you'll find our Twitter, all of our social media links are there. We also have a Slack. So if you click on there and the social media Slack icon, you can actually join our Slack and talk to us. We're there. We also have Intercom, if you're familiar with it, on all of our pages. Mm-hmm. So it's like a live chat bot. So if you come there and send us a message, we'll give you an answer and answer your questions. So that's those are the best ways to reach us right now.
Nice. Well, appreciate you all opening your doors for everyone like that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Luke, I've really enjoyed our chat today. Unless there's anything else that you'd like for people to know, I'll wrap us up here. Again, it was a pleasure having you on. Everybody, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more interviews like this, where I talk to people like Luke who are building things on top of Ethereum. And until then, thanks for watching Dapp University.
Thanks again, Gregory.